When my pregnant wife went in for her routine ultrasound, the doctor suddenly stopped the scan, set the probe down, and asked to speak with me alone. My wife was still lying on the table, confused, her belly covered in gel. The doctor pulled me into a small hallway and closed the door behind her. Then she looked at me with the kind of eyes that people use when they are about to change everything. She said 7 words I will never forget. Your wife is in serious danger. Tonight. If you enjoy dramatic stories like this, make sure to subscribe to Francisko's Stories for more. New stories are posted every week, and you never want to miss one. My name is Daniel. I was 34 years old when this happened, living in a mid-sized city, working as an account manager for a logistics company. Nothing special, nothing remarkable. I was the kind of man who paid his bills on time, remembered anniversaries, and grilled on weekends. My life was quiet in the way that most people dream about. My wife's name is Claire. We had been married for 3 years when she got pregnant. It was planned. It was wanted. It was everything we had talked about on our second date, laughing over wine about how many kids we would have and what we would name them. When she showed me the positive test, I cried. I am not ashamed to say that. I sat on the edge of our bathtub and cried like a child because I was so happy. The pregnancy went smoothly for the first 5 months. Claire was tired sometimes, and she had a phase where she could not stand the smell of coffee, which made mornings in our house very tense. But overall, she was healthy. She glowed, the way people always say pregnant women glow, and I used to watch her sometimes when she did not know I was looking, just standing in the kitchen or reading on the couch, and I would think, this is it. This is the life I was supposed to have. The ultrasound appointment was at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday, 20 weeks, the halfway mark. This was supposed to be the big one, the anatomy scan, where the technician checks everything and you find out the sex if you want to. We had already agreed we wanted to know. Claire had a feeling it was a boy. I thought it was a girl. We were both wrong, as it turned out. But not about the baby's sex. The clinic was a small private practice about 15 minutes from our house. We had been going there since the beginning of the pregnancy. The doctor was a woman named Dr. Ellison. She was in her early 50s, professional and calm, the kind of doctor who made you feel like everything was under control just by the way she walked into a room. That morning, Claire was excited. She had barely slept. She kept squeezing my hand in the waiting room and showing me baby name articles on her phone. I remember laughing and telling her we still had 4 months to decide. She told me I was the least spontaneous person she had ever met. I told her that was why she married me. We were called in a few minutes after 11. The exam room was cool and smelled like antiseptic. Claire climbed onto the table and lifted her shirt while the technician prepared the gel. The technician was a young woman I had not seen before. She introduced herself as Maya. She was friendly, warm, the kind of person who was clearly good at her job. Maya ran the probe over Claire's stomach, and the screen filled with that familiar gray and white image. The soft shape of our baby appeared, and I leaned forward in my chair. Claire made a small sound, almost a gasp, and reached back to find my hand. We watched the baby move. We saw the little flicker of the heartbeat. Maya pointed out the spine, the brain, the chambers of the heart. I was so focused on the screen that I almost did not notice Maya's expression change. It was subtle. If I had not been watching carefully, I would have missed it entirely. Her face did not fall, exactly. It was more like something behind her eyes shifted. She moved the probe to a different angle and looked more closely at something. Then she excused herself, saying she needed to get the doctor. Claire smiled at me. "That's normal," she said. "They always get the doctor to confirm things." I nodded. I believed her. Dr. Ellison came in less than 2 minutes later. She greeted us warmly, just as she always did, but there was a slight tension in her movements that I could not quite name. She took the probe from Maya and began examining the screen herself, asking Claire a few routine questions about how she was feeling, whether she had experienced any pain or bleeding. Claire answered easily. No, nothing like that. She felt fine. She felt great, actually. Dr. Ellison nodded and made some notes. Then she smiled and said she wanted to take a few extra measurements, which was completely routine, nothing to worry about. She told Claire she was going to step out briefly and that Maya would stay with her. Then she looked at me and said, very casually, "Daniel, Would you mind coming with me for just a moment? Claire waved her hand. Go ahead. I'll talk to the baby while you're gone. I followed Dr. Ellison out of the room and into the hallway. She walked quickly to a small office at the end of the corridor, the kind of room that barely had space for a desk and 2 chairs. She closed the door. She did not sit down. She looked at me and said, I need you to stay calm, and I need you to trust me. I felt the floor shift beneath me, even though nothing moved. What's wrong with the baby? I asked. The baby is fine, she said. The baby is healthy. Then what? Daniel. She lowered her voice even though we were alone and the door was closed. I have seen something in Claire's imaging that concerns me, not the fetus, Claire herself. There are markers that I want to investigate further before I say anything more specific. I don't want to alarm her unnecessarily. I stared at her. What kind of markers? She hesitated, just for a moment, but I noticed it. Vascular anomalies, patterns in the blood flow that I want to have reviewed by a specialist. I am scheduling an urgent referral today. Urgent, I repeated. The word landed in my stomach like a stone. Please don't panic, she said. This may turn out to be nothing. Pregnancy changes the body in countless ways, and sometimes we see things that resolve on their own. But I wanted you to know so that you can pay close attention to how she feels tonight and over the next few days. If she reports any sudden headaches, any visual disturbances, any confusion or disorientation, you take her to the emergency room immediately. Not urgent care, the emergency room. I asked her again what she thought it was. She said she was not ready to say. She said she needed more information. She gave me her personal cell number on a small card and told me to call her at any hour if anything changed. We walked back to the exam room. Claire was lying there talking to her belly, telling the baby about the music she planned to play during the drive home. She looked up at us with a big smile. Everything okay? Everything's fine, Dr. Ellison said smoothly. I just wanted to confirm a couple of measurements with Daniel. All looks good. Claire beamed. I knew it. We drove home. Claire talked the whole way about whether we should paint the nursery yellow or sage green. I said yes to things without really hearing them. Inside, I was very, very quiet. That evening, I could not eat. I pushed food around my plate while Claire told me about a crib she had found online. I watched her face, looking for signs of something I could not even name. She looked completely normal. She looked beautiful and healthy and full of life. She caught me staring. What? She said, laughing a little. Nothing, I said. You just look really good. She rolled her eyes, but she was smiling. I waited until she fell asleep before I went to the living room with my laptop. I started searching for vascular anomalies in pregnancy. I should not have done that. The internet is not a doctor, and at midnight, alone with your fear, it becomes something much worse. I read about conditions I could not pronounce, about statistics that meant nothing without context, about case studies that terrified me. I closed the laptop after an hour and sat in the dark. Then, I did something I'm still not sure I should have done. I called my brother-in-law. His name is Marcus. He is Claire's older brother, and he is a cardiologist at a hospital 2 cities away. We had always gotten along well. He was the kind of person who was easy to talk to, direct and calm, the opposite of me in moments of stress. I told myself I was calling him because he would have medical knowledge that could help me understand what Dr. Ellison had said. But even as I dialed his number, something else was pulling at the back of my mind, something I could not quite see yet. He answered on the 3rd ring, groggy. It was almost 1 a.m. Daniel, what's wrong? I told him about the appointment, about what Dr. Ellison had said. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Vascular anomalies, he repeated slowly. Yes, she said blood flow patterns. She said she was referring Claire to a specialist. Another silence. Did she say what kind of specialist? No. Okay. His voice was careful, measured in a way that felt deliberate. Listen, Daniel, I'm sure Dr. Ellison is being thorough. That's a good thing. Don't read too much into it. Marcus, you went quiet when I said it. I noticed. I'm half asleep, Daniel. You're the lightest sleeper I've ever met. You were awake the moment you picked up. He did not answer right away. Then he said, Look, just wait for the specialist appointment. There's no point speculating. I said goodnight and hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Something was wrong. I could feel it the way you feel a change in the weather before it arrives. Not panic, not yet, just a low, steady hum of wrongness that I could not locate or identify. The specialist appointment came 3 days later. Dr. Ellison had arranged it herself with a maternal fetal medicine specialist named Dr. Park at the main hospital downtown. Claire came to that appointment without any real concern. She thought it was a follow-up, an extra precaution, the kind of thing careful doctors arranged. I did not correct her. During the appointment, I watched Dr. Park's face the same way I had watched Maya's. He was harder to read. He was older, experienced, with the kind of composure that came from decades of delivering difficult news. But at one point, when he was reviewing a particular image on his screen, he paused for just a fraction of a second. That tiny pause told me something. Afterward, he spoke to Claire directly and calmly, explaining that he wanted to run some additional blood panels and schedule an MRI. He said it was precautionary. He used that word 3 times. Precautionary. In the parking lot, Claire turned to me and said, "Should I be worried?" I took her hand. "Dr. Park is being thorough," I said. "That's a good thing." She believed me, and I hated myself for using almost the exact same words Marcus had used with me. That night I went through Claire's things. I am not proud of this. I want to be honest about what I did and why. I was not looking for anything specific. I was looking for the thing I could not name, the thing that had been pulling at me since that first appointment. I went through the drawer on her nightstand while she was in the shower. I looked through the folder on her desk where she kept medical papers and receipts. And then I found the letter. It was at the bottom of the folder, folded twice on plain white paper. It was handwritten. The handwriting was familiar to me, though it took me a moment to place it. When I did, my hands went cold. It was from Marcus. It was dated 6 months ago, before the pregnancy was confirmed, before any of this had started. I will not repeat the entire letter, but the important parts, the parts that changed everything, were these. Marcus had known something about Claire's medical history that she had never told me. Specifically, he had known that Claire had been diagnosed, years before we met, with a hereditary vascular condition, a condition that carried significant risk during pregnancy, a condition that her doctors at the time had strongly advised her to disclose to any future partner before trying to conceive. She had not told me. The letter was Marcus writing to his sister, pleading with her to tell me the truth before it was too late. He wrote that he loved her. He wrote that he understood why she was afraid. He wrote that she could not build a family on a secret this large. She had kept the letter. She had kept it, and she had said nothing. I sat on the edge of the bed and I read that letter 3 times. I heard the shower turn off. I heard her moving around in the bathroom. I put the letter back exactly where I found it. She came out in her robe, hair in a towel, and saw my face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," I said. "Headache." She sat next to me and pressed her lips to my temple. "Poor thing," she said. I closed my eyes. I thought I might be sick. I did not sleep that night. I lay next to her in the dark and tried to understand what I was feeling. Betrayal, yes. Fear, absolutely. But underneath all of it was something more complicated, something that took me a long time to find the right word for. Grief. I was grieving the version of my marriage I had believed in. The next morning, I called Marcus from my car before work. He answered immediately. He knew I would call. I think part of him had been waiting for it since the night I first called him about the ultrasound. "She never told you," he said. It was not a question. No, a long silence. "Marcus, how serious is it?" He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "The condition itself is manageable in most cases, but in pregnancy, the cardiovascular strain can create complications, serious ones in some cases. That's what Dr. Ellison saw. That's what she was reacting to." "Why didn't you tell me when I called you?" "Because it wasn't my place to tell you," he said. "It was hers. It has always been hers. I wrote her that letter because I was desperate for her to do the right thing. She told me she would think about it, and then she got pregnant, and He stopped. I should have pushed harder. "Yes," I said, "you should have." There was nothing else to say on that point. I went to work. I sat at my desk and stared at a spreadsheet that I did not read for 4 hours. Around noon, I got a call from Dr. Park's office. The blood results were in. They wanted Claire and me to come in the following morning for a consultation. That evening, I made dinner. Claire sat at the kitchen counter and watched me cook, which was something she always did when she was trying to relax. She told me about a book she was reading. She told me that the baby had been kicking more than usual. She held my hand over her stomach, and we felt it together, that small, determined movement beneath the skin. I looked at her face while she looked down at her belly. I thought about all the conversations we had ever had, about honesty, about trust, about what it meant to choose another person for life. Claire had always said that the most important thing in a relationship was complete honesty. She said it often. She believed it deeply. I'd always admired her for that. And yet, after dinner, after the dishes were done and she had gone to read in bed, I stood in the kitchen for a long time trying to figure out what I was going to do, whether I would confront her before the appointment or after, whether I would let the doctor say what needed to be said and deal with the rest later, whether I was capable of sitting across from her with this knowledge and pretending to be the man she thought I was. I decided I could not wait. I went into the bedroom. I sat in the chair by the window, the one she always draped her cardigan over. I said her name. She looked up from her book. "I need to tell you something," I said, "and I need you to listen to all of it before you respond." She put the book down. Her face was already changing, reading mine. I told her what I had found. I told her calmly. I did not raise my voice. I told her about the letter, about the conversation with Marcus, about the 2 nights I had spent lying awake next to her, not knowing what was real. She did not deny it. I had half expected her to deny it, to give me some explanation that would undo everything. Instead, she sat up very slowly and folded her hands in her lap and looked at the comforter and said, "I was going to tell you." When? After the first trimester, then after the second appointment, then She stopped. It got harder every time. Every time I was about to say it, I imagined losing you, and I just couldn't. "You should have told me before we tried," I said, "before we even talked about trying. You know that." "Yes." Her voice was almost a whisper. "I know that." I asked her how serious it was. She told me what she knew, which was more than I expected. She had been monitoring it quietly through a separate doctor I had known nothing about. She had been managing her health carefully, taking precautions, trying to minimize risk. She truly believed, she said, that she could get through the pregnancy safely. She was not being reckless. She was not gambling with her life or the babies carelessly. She was just terrified that the truth would cost her everything she wanted. I sat with that for a long time. "You don't get to make that choice for me," I finally said. "You don't get to decide what I can or cannot handle. That's not love, Claire. That's control." She started to cry, not dramatically. Quietly, the way people cry when they know they deserve what they are hearing. We talked for 2 more hours. Neither of us slept much. The appointment with Dr. Park the next morning was the most surreal experience of my life. We sat in those hard waiting room chairs, not quite touching, and when they called us in and the doctor sat down and began reviewing the results in that careful, measured way that specialists have, I already knew most of what he was going to say. The condition was real, and it was present. The risks during pregnancy were elevated but not unmanageable with proper monitoring and care. Dr. Park was direct and kind. He outlined a treatment plan, a monitoring schedule, a series of precautions. He said the word hopeful twice, and I held on to both times. When we walked out, Claire stopped on the sidewalk outside the hospital and turned to face me. Her eyes were red. The morning sun was behind her. "I know I may have broken something," she said. "Between us, I know that." I looked at her for a long time. Here's the thing about people you love. They are never one thing. They are never simple. Claire was a woman who had spent years terrified of a diagnosis she had never asked for, a condition she had inherited from a mother who had kept her own secrets, who had died too young, who had left behind a daughter who learned that the body was something to fear and hide rather than discuss. She was not a villain. She was a person who was afraid, who made a profound and selfish mistake, who had tried in her limited and flawed way to hold together the life she desperately wanted. That does not make it right. I want to be clear about that. What she did was wrong. It was a fundamental breach of trust, the kind that does not simply dissolve because you understand where it came from. But I also knew, standing on that sidewalk, that I was not ready to walk away. Not yet. Maybe not at all. We have to do this differently, I said. Everything from here. No more secrets, not a single one. If you feel something, you tell me. If a doctor tells you something, I am in that room. We do this together or we don't do it at all. She nodded. She pressed her fingers to her mouth the way she did when she was trying not to fall apart. Together, she said. I'm not going to tell you that everything was fine after that. It was not fine. The months that followed were the hardest of our marriage. We saw a couples therapist, which we had never done before, and which was uncomfortable in the specific way that necessary things often are. There were nights when I lay awake with the anger of it all, when the betrayal would resurface and I would look at the ceiling and feel it like something physical in my chest. But we stayed. We chose to stay. Claire was monitored closely for the remainder of the pregnancy. Dr. Park and Dr. Ellison coordinated her care with a precision that I came to deeply respect. There were tense weeks, a hospital stay in the 8th month when her blood pressure spiked and everyone held their breath for 4 days. But she came home. She always came home. Our daughter was born in November, 7 pounds, 2 ounces, the most astonishing thing I had ever seen in my life. They placed her in my arms while the nurses attended to Claire, and I stood there, holding this impossibly small person who had arrived in the world, trailing all this love and all this fear and all this complicated, difficult truth. And I thought about secrets, about the ones we keep because we are afraid, about the damage they do, about the strange courage it takes to finally stop keeping them. I thought about Marcus, who had tried to do the right thing and had been put in an impossible position. I called him from the hospital that night. He cried when I told him the baby was here. He flew in to meet her 2 days later. I thought about Dr. Ellison, standing in that tiny office with the door closed, choosing to speak to me instead of staying silent. She could have logged her concerns in a chart and waited for the next appointment. She chose not to. She chose to put the information in the hands of someone who could use it. That decision may have saved Claire's life. It certainly saved our marriage in the strange, indirect way that devastating things sometimes do. Our daughter's name is Nora. She is 15 months old now as I tell this story. She has Claire's eyes and my stubbornness and a laugh that sounds like the best thing I have ever heard. Claire and I are not the same people we were before that ultrasound appointment. We are quieter with each other in some ways, more careful, but we are also more honest than we have ever been. We say the hard things now. We do not let them pile up in the bottom of folders, unspoken and heavy. Some days I still feel the echo of what she kept from me. I think I always will. But I also know that people are capable of extraordinary growth when they are finally forced to face what they have been hiding. I have watched Claire do exactly that, slowly, imperfectly, with effort that I have come to recognize as genuine. We chose each other once at the beginning, without knowing what we were really choosing. We chose each other again in that therapist's office, in that hospital room, on that sidewalk outside Dr. Park's building. Those second choices, I think, are the ones that actually count. If you made it to the end of this story, I want to thank you for listening. These kinds of stories are never easy to tell, and they are never simple. Real life rarely is. If you want to hear more stories like this one, please subscribe to Francisko's Stories. It means more than you know.